first, we have WWE's debut on ESPN coming up this weekend with Wrestle Palooza. Drew wanted to jump on here right now and break down the Brock Lesnar and John Cena match. And he has some strong thoughts, I know, about AJ Lee's return after 10 years away from WWE. But no, right. This is a, do you know any of the names I just said? You know, like who Brock Lesnar is?
Yeah. You know, I know Brock Lesnar, and I know there's like the whole drama with him and like Dana White and Ariel Helwani like a few years ago. But like, yeah, I don't know. I've seen a little bit of WrestleMania here and there before. Yeah. That's about my knowledge of WWE.
Okay. Well, that's pretty much all the knowledge I think you or any of our listeners need for at least the slant we're going to take on Wrestlepalooza. So this is a story that dates back to, I think it was late July. It comes out that WWE has signed its next media rights deal for its premium live events, formerly known as the pay-per-views. They're going to ESPN. This was supposed to start next year around the time of WrestleMania. It turns out they renegotiated the deal. It's going to start this weekend with Wrestlepalooza, a newly formed event. It does seem like they want to make this like maybe not a WrestleMania level show, but like in the upper tier of their premium live events. A really big show. They're going all out for their ESPN debut. ESPN's going all out. You can see this week they have the entire ESPN promotional machine behind it. But the catch with all of this, and this is something that dated back to the initial announcement, is that these PLEs, the premium live events, are going to be on ESPN's new direct-to-consumer streaming service. And so as opposed to Peacock, which costed, I mean, at one point you could get for like $5.99 a month, anywhere from like $5.99 to $15.99, depending on the tier you were getting. The ESPN DTC app costs $30 a month, $29.99. The positive is there are a lot of cable services where you can just authenticate your subscription. If you're a Spectrum subscriber, you can authenticate your login. You get the DTC app for free. You're basically saving money. However, as opposed to what was initially put out there by ESPN when this whole app got first announced officially, I think it was last May. There are a lot of cable subscribers who are not going to have access to this. They do not have carriage deals with a lot of these cable companies right now for the DTC app. And so YouTube TV, what are some of the other big ones that won't have it, Drew?
Yeah, I think the biggest ones are Comcast, Xfinity, and YouTube TV. But then there's also like Cox, Sling TV, a few other smaller ones. Which kind of puts the number of, cable subscribers probably conservatively around 30 million once you add them all up, maybe a little less than 30 million. And that's about like half of like the pay TV universe, the pay TV ecosystem, as we call it these days. So this is like not an insignificant number of cable subscribers that still don't have access to the ESPN Unlimited tier and therefore won't be able to watch Wrestlepalooza this weekend unless they go ahead and shell out like an extra $30 for by and large content like that they are already receiving through their pay TV subscription. So in essence, like they'd be double paying in that scenario.
Yeah, and that's like $29.99 is not an insignificant price. If WWE pay-per-views, I think they used to cost like $60, and then starting in 2014, they launched the WWE Network, which was actually like way ahead of its time in the era of streaming, where it was a monthly fee of $9.99, but you got access to the pay-per-view. So like it cost you $9.99 each month for access to the pay-per-views and the entire library. Then it moves to Peacock in 2021. And again, that price was somewhere between like $5.99 and $20, depending on what tier you were paying for. And so that's the charmed life that WWE fans like myself have been living since 2014 is whatever you are paying for these premium live events, these pay-per-views, like it's been a pretty minimal price. So to see that get jacked all the way back up to $29.99, if you're currently either not a subscriber of the ESPN app or a subscriber to a cable service that doesn't have the authentication deal right now, that's a big deal. And I think you were on the call. The ESPN held a conference call with the media yesterday about this. I was on it as well. And that was a big topic, was like, do you feel like you've educated your audience about this enough? Because just watching, even on Monday Night Raw this past week, Joe Tessitore says, all you need is ESPN. If you have ESPN, you have access to Wrestlepalooza. Like, it is not that clear cut. I think the fact that the app is the same name, that it's just ESPN, I think that's causing a lot of confusion here. And the other part, which I probably should have led with, is this is like the first real test for the ESPN app. This is the first like truly exclusive content that's going to be on this ESPN app that you're going to have millions of subscribers trying to get access to. And at this point, I think it's fair to say that there is a big education issue when it comes to the way WWE has presented this.
100%. I think that's kind of the crux of the issue here, right? Is like there's just been disingenuous marketing by both ESPN and WWE with this. Like, we know that, ever since ESPN announced this launch, their intention was to have all of the distributors on board already by the time the ESPN Unlimited was available for consumers. But that's not the case, right? Like, they wanted to launch before football season, and about half of the distributors that carry ESPN don't have the deals in place yet. So you combine that with striking this deal with WWE, which came to fruition very quickly and wasn't even supposed to start this early. And this is how you get a situation where you're going to have people double paying in order to get the get the event on Saturday. To me, it's just been a complete failure in messaging from both ESPN and WWE. And I understand why, right? Like, this is a temporary issue. These deals are going to get sorted out in the next few months. And, by the time the calendar turns to 2026, this will not be a problem. And I don't think ESPN wants to confuse consumers even more than they probably already are, right? They don't want to start breaking down which distributors have access, which don't, because they know this is going to be solved eventually. And at the end of the day, wrestling fans are very passionate. They're fervent viewers of WWE content, but it's still a small subsection of the people that will ultimately end up using ESPN Unlimited, right? So I think it's just kind of the alignment of all of this timing just did not work out for ESPN, and they're kind of just having to ask for forgiveness rather than get out in front of the issue.
I listened to a podcast. It's run by a Patreon called WrestleNomics. If I could ever get you into wrestling, this would be like the entryway. It's just like purely like nerd business talk, but it's my favorite way to follow the world of pro wrestling. I listen to it every week. Brandon Thurston and John Pollock, they do great work, but they were on the call too. And one thing they picked up on, and I'm curious, I meant to ask you this. They thought that ESPN was almost going out of their way to avoid making it seem like they were using it as leverage in the negotiations. Like, they didn't want to, they got asked probably 4 or 5 questions about all of this confusion we're talking about. And it almost seemed like they wanted to avoid using this as leverage against Google, against Comcast, against Xfinity, because they do know these deals are ultimately going to get done. And now, I mean, maybe these just weren't the guys who should be speaking on these matters, but what do you make of that?
I think it's very possible. And, you've seen analysts like Rich Greenfield at Lightshed suggest that, over time, ESPN's going to treat the ESPN Unlimited tier as just like another, cable channel. Essentially, they're going to be putting exclusive live programming on there and then using it as a bargaining chip in these carriage negotiations and saying, hey, YouTube TV, hey, Comcast, look at all of this programming that we have that's exclusive to our app. If you want to, if you want to have your subscribers gain access to that, you're going to need to pay up, right? So it's essentially like using it as another cable network just in the digital age. So I think it's spot on. I don't know if that's specifically why they're doing this with Wrestlepalooza. I think that's more of just what I said with the poor timing, wanting to launch before football season, and then having this WWE deal done quicker than anticipated. But it's certainly an option for ESPN to leverage that type of programming.
You've been saying double pay, and so what you mean by that is, like, if I'm a YouTube TV subscriber, I already have access to ESPN. Now I'm going to have to pay for the ESPN app that I would have access to if I was just a Spectrum subscriber. It's not, this is something that with not most, but a lot of other cable services I would be getting access to. And just because I months ago, picked the wrong cable package, now I have to pay for this app that Spectrum subscribers are getting for free. I'm a Spectrum subscriber. And actually what's funny about that is I initially had a package that wasn't able to authenticate. I had like a lower tier, pick your own channels package. And when the ESPN app launched, I noticed I wasn't getting access to a bunch of things. And I looked into it and I like needed to upgrade my tier. It actually wound up saving me money. And now I got like, I think a year's worth of like authentication to Peacock and everything. So it worked out. But like, had I not been like in the sports media field, I probably would have been somebody logging in on Saturday and not realizing I didn't have access to it. And so I think that's going to happen to a lot of people. But going back to like the idea of double paying, I think you're right, but I'm also I'm surprised they're doing the authentication. I'm surprised they aren't making everybody sign up for it, because they are putting exclusive content on this. And if you do build up that portfolio enough, it gets to the point where it's like, you know, an NBC subscriber isn't able to automatically authenticate Peacock. A CBS subscriber isn't automatically able to authenticate Paramount Plus. I'm almost like I'm going to sound like just like a bootlicker. I'm like just grateful I have an option to authenticate, because I didn't anticipate that being the case.
Right. So I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think ESPN is looking more at the long term right here, right? Like they want to simplify the experience for users. So they want, no matter where you're subscribing to ESPN, they want you to get everything. I think that's a lovely idea. But I think mostly from a business perspective, what they're expecting to do is, like I said, if they put enough premium programming exclusive to their app, you know, and consumers have this expectation that if I'm subscribed to ESPN, I get it all. I get everything. There's no tiering. There's no additional subscription. They're going to be able to leverage that with the distributors and you know, command a higher carriage fee at the end of the day. And I think this is like a great way to kind of, you know, not kill the golden goose of your ESPN. You know, the most lucrative part of their business is these carriage fees that they earn from the distributors. And, you know, launching the app in this way and setting consumers' expectations how they have, you know, it makes sense that like they can drag that type of relationship on for much longer if everything, you know, comes to fruition.
Yeah. When this app launched, I thought there was a chance like this might be my avenue to cut the cord, and I could just get like the ESPN app as my baseline and then pick and choose other things. But the fact that it is now like that I'm able to authenticate it, like I'm not in any rush now. Like whereas before I might have been more willing to cut costs.
And I think if I could speak to the confusion that's going to happen on Saturday, even if you're a Comcast subscriber or a YouTube TV subscriber right now, you've been able to authenticate into the app in so much as like you can sign in and then you can watch, you know, all of ESPN's linear channels through the app like you normally would on Comcast or YouTube TV. And so you haven't experienced running into a paywall in all likelihood. You might very well think like you're fully in the app, you can access all the content. But come Saturday, when there's an exclusive WWE event, you're going to realize, oh, I actually do not have ESPN Unlimited. Even though I'm getting all of this ESPN content through my cable provider, you're not actually on the proper tier. So I think that's going to cause a lot of confusion as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the situation I was in a month ago when this first launched. Was I was like, I could log in, I could watch Get Up and First Take through the app, but then I was trying to go to multi-view and it like wasn't letting me. And I wish I would have recorded my phone call with Spectrum because I was just reiterating how important it was to me to have access to this app. It was really ridiculous.
Do you understand this is my career?
It was, do you understand? I'm going to watch these WWE PLEs one way or another. So one, we're in agreement. Like Saturday, I think is just going to be a disaster. Like I joked offline, like we can just pre-write the story now that we're going to get a lot of complaints. As best as I can tell, like we are the only people covering this, like raising red flags and saying like, hey, like you still need, if you're a subscriber to this cable service, you're probably not going to have access to it by Saturday. So it's going to be a disaster. I think it's hard for me to imagine it won't be. What do you think the timeline is for ESPN to get these deals done with YouTube TV and with Comcast so that they can authenticate ultimately down the line?
Well, I think we know that Google's deal with Disney expires next month. So unless either side is willing to risk a blackout in the middle of football season, which I don't foresee being the case, I think by next month you'll see something on that front. I believe, I'm not sure if this is reported, I might have heard conjecture about this, that NBC/Comcast's deal is also sorry, I shouldn't say NBC, Comcast/Xfinity. Their deal is also up next month, I believe. So I think we can expect the two big ones by the end of October to be all squared away. Can't speak to the other smaller distributors, but we heard the ESPN executive JT Lasker say yesterday during the call that by the end of the year, the vast majority, if not all distributors that carry ESPN will have access to the ESPN Unlimited app. It'll just be, kind of finalizing the terms with those companies.
What have your impressions of the app been now here 1 month in?
I'll be honest. I haven't used it since like I did a review on it the first day, and I tested out all the integration and like the betting features and the multi-view. It was all very smooth. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
But I can't say like I've opened the app on my phone or used any of like the personalization features since. I don't know. I'm a sucker for the bundle. Like I like being able to like flip channels, and like I have my YouTube TV set up in the proper way where like I have all of my broadcast networks and then all my sports networks and then all my news networks, like so I can just flip through. I like that experience. I don't really like having to click into an app to watch anything. So but I think overall people have liked it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably used it a little more. I have a Roku TV, so it's just a matter of, do I want to go into the Spectrum app or do I want to go into the ESPN app? And depending on if I'm feeling frisky, sometimes I'll go into the ESPN one instead. It's clean. I mean, it's kind of just an upgraded version of ESPN Plus at this point, because there's not, other than the multi-view, like there's not a lot differentiating it from what ESPN used to offer digitally. But that will change this weekend with Wrestle Palooza, and we will have you covered on how that goes and any ensuing fallout that comes from here.